Hello, I'm Kurt Wright, and I'm here today in St. Albans interviewing Marianna Gamache, candidate for the House Legislature from District Franklin 4.
Correct.
Right, Marianna?
Correct, yes.
So, Marianna, let's start out. Tell the viewers a little bit about yourself. What town are you from? And just tell viewers about yourself a little bit.
Well, I live in Swanton, and I have been, I like to consider myself an adopted daughter of Vermont because I'm not from here originally. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and moved to Florida, and where I then, some years later, met my husband, my now deceased husband, Paul Gamache, here from St. Albans. And obviously we married and came up to Vermont. And years before then, before I moved to Florida, I used to come up to Vermont, the southern part of the state. I had friends and we would go skiing and that sort of thing. So I kind of had a love affair with Vermont from that perspective. And then ended up here, which I thought was providential, I think. And so prior to meeting my husband, when I was in New York and in Florida, I was engaged. I was employed as a college admissions counselor and officer, and I did that for a number of years. And when I married my husband, he retired me, so I was able to come up here, and I inherited then. I had ended with a blended family, which was quite lovely, including grandchildren. So
great. Well, Marianna, what drove you to decide to want to run for the House? What motivates you to want to be to serve the people of your district and Vermont?
Well, I was raised in a very politically active family, although they were not Republicans.
That's okay.
And
because you're going to be representing the entire district.
Well, yes, that is very true. And it's the lack of representation that has really driven me, or been a force for me to get involved, because the state, as I see it for quite a while now, has been going off the main course, and it is just not, it's not good, it's not being served well by Vermont right now.
So the issue of balance in Montpelier.
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Fact that
we have one super party rule, and because of that, the voices of all the people are not being heard. They're certainly not being acted upon, and we're going off the rails. The taxes are way too high. The education expenses are completely out of line. We have this single-payer government healthcare system that's supposed to go into effect, and we have no idea of where the funding is going to be coming from, because the governor has repeatedly not come forward with that information. As a citizen, I am really concerned about that. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I don't know where the funding is going to come from. There rumors are flying around as to what the possible funding sources are, and it seems to be pointing towards employers and employees. And I don't think I really don't think that's doable.
Well, Marianna, I couldn't agree with you more, and I serve in the legislature. I've been in the House for a number of years now, and that's what we found is that when there's a supermajority in both houses, the House, the Senate, the governor, that the voices aren't heard, and really the minority is kind of stifled, and it's not really good for it doesn't make for good government. It doesn't make for necessarily good results. So I think you're really right about that. We certainly could use a more balanced legislature.
Yeah.
I know you're in the Capitol quite a bit. I see you there, so So what do you? I think you just touched on it, but what do you see as the biggest issues facing Montpelier? And I know that you've been out campaigning, so what do you think people's biggest concerns are?
Taxes and jobs are the two things, and healthcare comes in close to that, and that's what I'm hearing. There's also the Shoreline Protection Act. A lot of people are not happy with it, and I understand why, because looking at the law, it leaves out categories of people. It really is not addressing all of the various components of industries that are involved and are contributors to the lake pollution, and that's not fair to anyone. I certainly don't want to single out any particular segment to point a finger, because I think that the government in its own way has created or set the stage for the creation of what has become a problem. So I think that a way needs to be found which is not burdensome to any segment of the communities that are responsible or for the pollution. There needs to be a way found that we can address the issue, and they can do what they need to do, but it needs to be done in a way that certainly doesn't put them out of business and is not the kind of economic burden that makes it extraordinarily hard for them to continue with business.
Right.
Because I do believe everybody is responsible. Responsible in the sense that feeling responsibility and wanting to do what is good for.
So let's talk about one of the other issues that you just mentioned, which is undoubtedly is a huge issue in everyone's district across the state, which is property taxes. So I'll just make a statement sort of and let you comment and react to it. I went to a forum, a seminar on property taxes, Act 60/68, the education funding system.
Right.
And what we heard repeatedly there was that the system is too complicated. No one understands it. It is obviously we're the #1 spending state in the nation, the lowest teacher ratio in the nation, which makes kind of for a deadly combination in terms of property taxpayers. And we have situations across the state where some school districts actually level fund their budgets or even decrease them, but still have to go to taxpayers with a double-digit increase sometimes. So if you could comment on all of that, what I just said, what you think, and what you're maybe hearing, what you think taxpayers are thinking about that, because again, the governor gave a State of the State address where he talked about one issue, and it's a big issue, and it's certainly a big issue up here. We'll talk about that a little later, which is the opiate issue.
Right.
Important issue.
Right.
But a lot of us felt like, okay, that's a big issue, but how about extend the speech by 10 or 15 or 20 minutes and talk about some other issues that are very important as well, like property taxes and health care. So what do you
I think the governor, he sticks to issues that he prefers to speak about and doesn't speak to issues that perhaps would put him on the spot in terms of what he has done thus far as governor. But with regard to education, what I hear is, and as a taxpayer myself, the whole system, I think, needs to be restructured. The way in which we do the funding. There have been a number of ideas bandied about at the State House. I just know that it cannot continue the way it is because it's totally unsustainable. And in terms of the cost, I believe that I'm correct, the cost to the state per pupil, I believe, is up now to $21,000 per pupil. And the student-teacher ratio, I believe, is 5-1, which is extraordinary.
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear that, I mean, we need to, in my view anyway, need to certainly reform it to make it less complex, to make it, there's also a disconnect from voters as to who's paying for it. So my feeling's always been that it needs to be more connected to local spending decisions.
Yeah.
And those would be good changes, but at the same time, if we're going to continue down the path, as you just mentioned, to be the highest spending state in the nation and the teacher-pupil ratio, et cetera, then somebody's going to pay.
Right. Yes.
It's an expensive system.
It is. It's very expensive. I do believe in that 5-to-1 ratio. I believe it's not only teachers. I believe that it's school staff in terms of support staff. So that would include paraprofessionals and librarians and people involved in that way. But it's still extraordinarily high. And one major component in that, which the state really has no control over, are the federal mandates. I believe there are 47 federal mandates that the government says, you must do this, but we're not paying for it. So you need to shelter the financial burden of this in any way you can.
Well, you're right about that, Marianna. And in addition to the federal mandates, which there's not a lot we can do about those.
No.
But there are also state mandates passed down to the local school districts. Mm-hmm. And they can be expensive as well. And I actually introduced an amendment to say that if the state government wanted to pass something down to local school districts, that they deemed it was that important to require something, yes, that we send the funding along from the state rather than pass it on to the local property taxpayers, because that continues to add on. It's a burden on the local schools, and yes, it's a burden on our local property taxpayers. I got rebuffed in the Appropriations Committee. We did get it back out on the House floor, but it passed out, but there seemed to be a little agreement where it was going to die in the Senate. Was that something that you would that you'd be supportive of? That you think is a good idea to try to ban unfunded mandates?
Oh, absolutely. We shouldn't have any unfunded mandates as far as I'm concerned.
As you said, if we think it's a bad idea on the federal level,
yeah,
we certainly should try to be consistent on the state level.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I think that's one thing that I think if you asked any school board member, they would probably almost virtually unanimously say, yes, do that. And the local property taxpayers, I think, would be pretty happy about that too.
Well, I know I would. As a
and you're a local property taxpayer, and,
yes,
and I'm sure you've had an opportunity to speak with lots of people as you've been out campaigning and talking to people door to door.
Yes, I have been. I mean, everyone wants children to have the best education that we possibly can have. But sometimes when I listen to oral arguments being given in the House for whatever bill happens to be being put forth, what I hear is a lot of, well, we need to do this because it shouldn't be this way. We shouldn't, people should have, or it's that compassion tone that I hear. But what I don't see is the reality in a lot of ways of what we can afford. And we can't have it all. In general, there's 100% of 100%. You can't get 150% out of 100%. It doesn't work that way. So I think in a lot of instances, it isn't that we shouldn't be doing something necessarily, but we need to really look at it and see, does it need to be done this way? Is there a more proficient way of doing it? Right. Are there other avenues? Because there are only so many resources that we have, and right now we really are kind of tapped out. We can't rely on people dying every year to help us out of our the budget hole that we seemingly always end up in.
In other words, someone dies and gives that.
Yes, the estate taxes.
Just to clarify what you meant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the estate taxes. When someone dies, if they're particularly if they have a substantial wealth, then the estate tax goes to the state, and that helps smooth over any financial obligations.
Right.
But that's, at best, it's a short-term
It doesn't solve the long-term problem.
No.
So, Marianna, let me move to another topic that has been in the news just recently.
Okay.
It probably doesn't quite hit in polling data in terms of the property tax and health care and a couple of other things, but it's an issue that I have been involved in and worked on in terms of legislation in the past. It's the issue of release of prisoners who have committed a sexual crime who are still considered, there's a term for it, it's called highly likely to reoffend.
Okay.
And a few years ago we passed legislation which was good legislation. It created for anybody that was convicted and put in our correction system, they would have much tougher supervision when released. And if they violated any of the list of conditions of their release, of which there were many, they could be immediately pulled back into prison and kept for, the term is an indeterminate life sentence, so they could be kept for up to life if they violate. So, but the problem is, and many of us said at the time, that only applied to people who were convicted of something after that law was passed. So people that are in the system now that already committed these crimes that are coming out over the next 10 and 15, 20 years, well, that won't apply to them, and they'll continue to be released into communities and sometimes where their victim still resides, as we're hearing right now in Waitsville, Vermont. What's your thoughts? I proposed, for example, a resolution last year, just a really reasonable resolution which said, ask the Corrections Department and our Public Safety Commission or department to look at this issue and come back to the legislature with some proposed recommendations for solutions of how we can provide better safety to our citizens, which is a paramount importance, I think, for government to provide in these cases. The majority party, supermajority party, didn't allow that resolution, which was very reasonable. And I had even talked to the corrections commissioner, who said, absolutely, we'll take a look. Somebody has to direct us to do it. Mm-hmm. It was sent to a committee and pretty much stuffed, where it just wasn't allowed to even see the light of day. Again, that sort of goes back to the issue you're talking about, but can you talk about that a little bit and your thoughts on, kind of plays into the theme you've already talked about in terms of balance and not having enough views represented?
To say that that's an unfortunate happening is to put it mildly. This is a matter of public safety, and unfortunately, this is not the only thing. I mean, I have witnessed myself other issues where, because there's been supermajority rule, we don't get anywhere. The issues are not allowed to come to the floor, and that's because we don't have any sort of balance, and we have to get back to a balance in the legislature. I don't think you can have really good government unless you do have a balance, because everybody's voice needs to be heard. These are societal problems that need to be worked on, and they need to be worked on by all the different members of the House, regardless of which party. It needs to be a bipartisan approach, and things like this need to be addressed because it's a matter of public safety.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, and I hear that in my district from not just Republicans, but just from people of different parties saying, yeah, we it's not a good thing for the state, for my district where they live, or in my case, for my constituents, to have such one-party domination. It just isn't good for democracy and good for the people of Vermont. And again, I was kind of stunned that the legislature wouldn't take up a reasonable resolution. Leadership just stuffed this, which just simply called for, let's find a system that's better than just simply releasing somebody highly likely to reoffend. And we saw it a year ago where they went from one community to the next, and the community was up in arms and just really caused a real commotion in the towns. And there's got to be a better system than that, but apparently the leadership in Montpelier doesn't want to find it.
I really don't think that anything much is going to change until the numbers in Montpelier change, until we do get a balance, because there's no incentive for change. It is being run according to the powers that be.
Right.
And there's very little that we can do to affect a change.
I think you're right. I think that it is a really important issue this year. It's been going on for obviously a number of years. It's not just a couple of years now.
Right. Oh no, it's been going on for quite a while. But if I may, the last thing that I observed before the legislature broke this session, there was a bill put forth that would have compelled the governor to give an accounting to the legislature of the whole health care system he was to actually have reported back no later than January 2013, as you know, report back to the legislature on the extent of the single-payer health care, the funding, the amount that it was going to be costing, and the funding sources, and how it was going to operate. Well, we're into September 11th. And that has not yet happened. So prior to the legislature winding down, there was a proposal put forth that would have compelled the governor to give this information. I believe it was by October 1. I
right.
believe that was October 1. And it was unanimously, no, the majority, the supermajority rejected it completely. Then there was an amendment to that put forth to make the deadline, I believe it was October 31. And there was a discussion then that happened, and people put forth their opinions of why this shouldn't be passed. And the bottom line was, well, the governor really doesn't have the numbers right now. So if he were to give any information, those numbers wouldn't be accurate, and they would have to be changed in January when he said he would give us an accounting anyway. So no, why should we do this? And I was stunned, actually, because that seemed to be an opinion that was shared by the majority. And so no action was taken whatsoever. And I thought to myself, I'm a constituent. Now, I know how my representative voted on that. I just couldn't imagine how all of these people who were the legislators who were up for re-election, who voted against having the governor come forth now, what they were going to be saying to their constituents when they were on the campaign trail. How are they going to justify this? Because I don't think it's justifiable.
Well, you're right. I mean, I know that I remember that very well. I said on the House floor that we couldn't wait through another election, and voters didn't want to wait through another election to find out what the funding source was
to know before November 4th.
For something as important as health care.
Yes.
A $2.2 billion price tag, and it's really, a lot of businesses are nervous, and a lot of doctors are nervous. But Marianna, we have to wrap this up. We've only got about a minute or two left. So why don't you spend the last minute or two basically telling the voters of your district, talking about the rest of your campaign and whatever it is you want to say to voters in persuading them to send you to Montpelier.
Well, goodness. I want to go to Montpelier because I'm one of you. I face the same issues that all of you face every day in trying to run a household, make ends meet. I am disturbed by many of the things that I see. I'm disturbed about the business closings that are happening. That is due from taxes. I'm concerned about the current business community in terms of how it's going to deal with healthcare. I mean, this is an enormous burden that's going to have to be shouldered by, it looks like, primarily the business community. Business people cannot make plans in terms of what they want to do with their business because they don't know what their expenses are going to be. And they, of course, the business community, in their expansion, when they expand, they can create jobs. Job creation leads to our young people staying here in the community and not leaving Vermont as frequently they are doing now. So we need to turn the page on what's going on here, and the only way we're going to do that is by electing new people. It doesn't make sense if you're not happy with the way in which things are being run to continually re-elect the same people and expect a different result. It really does not make it's not prudent because it's history has shown that doesn't happen.
Great point, Marianna. Great finish, and hope everybody considers voting for Marianna Gamache in District Franklin 4,
November
4th, Sheldon Swanton.
Yes.
And Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marianna.
Thank you very much.
Kurt Wright with Marianna Gamache running for House seat Franklin 4.